The Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
Chris's hens are in good voice. Well, that's more like a cockerel, isn't it? But they're in good voice this morning.
Incarcerated, the poor hens. The chickens are in the barn at the moment, so the cockerel thinks he should be outside. We're just on the edge of the restricted zone for bird flu here at the farm, and he's crowing away. That's a huge complaint, that noise we can hear from the High Ash resident cockerel.
I noticed there's another bird that met a nasty end somewhere down here. We're behind the big shed, aren't we? And just over there, yes, I mean, there's signs of a bit of prey going on.
Yes, there has. We're finding this all over the farm. We touched on it a bit on last week's podcast with bird flu, sadly, and in the week that's followed, I've found quite a number of rooks, particularly some jackdaws, and in particular wood pigeons have just deceased all over the farm, and then predators have come in and sort of used the carcass and just left these very distinctive piles of feathers. And it's unusual at this time of the year.
So this isn't a kill necessarily. This is a bird dying and then being picked.
I would have thought so, and as there's no shooting on this holding on High Ash Farm, it's unlikely to be anything that's shot, and no poisoning or anything like that. So, and the weather has not been particularly inclement, so it's not a cause of the weather. Rooks in particular do have a sort of sticky spot, but it's in the middle of summer, really, when invertebrates are hard to find, and that's their main food. They will probe down at this time of the year when farmers are just drilled a field of winter barley or wheat, and now you know why farmers have very red faces most of the time, busy scaring the rooks off. But it's really unusual, and when we drove around last week, we did encounter some rooks which are having difficulty in flying, and I've seen a lot in the last week with those symptoms, and then they just go up there. The interesting portion of it is they're away from the flocks. They seem to be very singular. They take themselves away because they kind of know they're ill, or they're ostracised by the group, because they're gregarious birds. Rooks, as you know, they nest together, sleep together, and certainly this time of the year feed together in the big flocks as well. So I am being vigilant and watching, but the dead birds, I don't touch them, I don't pick them up, because I don't want to become a carrier myself. Anyway, you just mentioned we're on the end of the big new farm workshop here, and right at the end of it, there's the farmhouse right beside us, where I was born in, High Ash House now, and we're standing beside a tree that was apparently planted when the house was built, and it's a yew tree. It's about 1852, the exact year. So we're looking at something, getting on a bit, and it's an English yew. Well, that's what we call it, but yew trees, beautiful, beautiful evergreen trees. You can't really call it an English species, although that's its name, because it will grow as high up as Scandinavia, and then you go right down south into the Mediterranean countries. You get it growing in Greece. Even I've seen it in North Africa. And from east to west, the range is absolutely colossal. It goes right across to China. In the west, in West Europe, it's in there as well, and then you come over to Western UK, it grows as far as Western Ireland, so it's huge range, so it's quite a common worldwide tree, and it always has fascinated me. It's got a lot of history, particularly with the UK. You go back to the 1700s. Before then, we were using bows and arrows as our weaponry, and one of the favourite weapons people to use all those centuries ago was the English longbow, a formidable piece of archery kit, and you could shoot arrows perhaps 200, 300, 400 metres with that. It's very strong hardwood, and it's flexible as well, and that was a real favourite for the English bowmen.
Used at Agincourt?
Yes, of course. But of course, a lot of the bows were made from yew from Central Europe and in particular southern France, because it was longer, the wood was longer, it had fewer knots in it, which would be a problem when you stretch your arrow back. The bow could actually snap, because these were very strong archers with very powerful arms to, propel the arrows as far as possible.
I once heard someone made a very good point, an historian, who said actually if we'd have had a battalion of longbowmen at Waterloo, we'd have won the battle a lot easier against Napoleon. But then someone said that the training had gone out by hundreds of years and no one was strong enough to pull these bows back anymore.
As I said, you need to have formidable strength, because you're launching an arrow 200 or 400 yards or so. A good bowman would go quarter of a mile, particularly if you were firing down the wind. And I've always been fascinated with some of the flint tools that I've found here at High Ash Farm. We go back to Neolithic times now. We just think of the bowman from 200, 300, 400 years ago, but archery goes back way before then, when we realised we could use bows and arrows to actually kill your dinner, if you like. And so some of the arrowheads I have in my little collection of flints are absolutely exquisite. They're tiny, not much larger than your thumbnail, and razor sharp, and so thin but made of flint you could almost see a light through them. They're stunningly beautiful. So a lot of history with this tree, but what we do on the Countryside podcast is kind of explore a little bit further about the tree itself. So first thing about it is it produces arils at this time of the year. Now, it was once thought that yew was a completely separate species to a conifer tree. A conifer is a cone-bearing tree, and obviously when you look at a yew tree, there are no cones on it. If I reach up and just pull down one of the branches,
it's just
here,
all these red, what look like berries.
Yes,
but you called them arils.
Yes, I did. Here we are. I'm just turning a branch upside down.
Beautiful colours.
And they're I'll get this on this week's podcast on High Ash Farm Facebook. You'll be able to actually see these little. It's a good description to call them a berry, because that's what it looks like. But over recent century or so, people who study trees have realised that these are not berries, they're greatly adapted pine cones, if you like. So at long last, yew has joined its proper family, which is the pine trees, the conifers, and arils, which is what these are greatly modified cones, is the best way to describe them. So all parts of the yew tree are quite poisonous. There's a chemical in the sap and in the leaves called taxine, and it is really poisonous to livestock. Perhaps that's why you often see yew trees growing in churchyards, and that was a clever trick by vicars way back then to stop farmers grazing their sheep around. It was because you didn't want your sheep to be eating the yew foliage, or particularly horses. It's meant to be quite toxic, the foliage, to horses if they do eat it. Cattle, apparently some cattle can eat it without any ill effects, and some it might well harm. But this time of the year, this tree, well over 150 years old, it'll soon be getting on for 200 years old, produces these arils, hundreds and literally thousands, probably getting on for 500,000 arils on this tree. An extraordinary feat. So there's a yew tree here, and there's one about 25 yards away from us with no arils on it. And what people didn't realise was trees, more than one species of tree, have sexes. So you get a male tree and a female tree.
And this one is a female, the big one here?
This big one is a female producing these arils, and I just brought a little sprig over from the one near us, and you can see it's covered in on the underside with literally hundreds of tiny little, smaller than a match head, little round, almost berry-like, but they're not. They open up in January and February and shed absolutely huge amounts of pollen. And then this tree, the female, will be producing tiny little fruit, particularly near the tips. They're not really appeared much yet of the little twigs that are growing here on this year's last year's growth, which is 2025, they'll get pollinated in early 2026, and they'll produce the next crop of arils at this time of the year in 2026. So amazing that you need a male tree and a female tree, and this male tree, well, if I'm walking past it and there's a slight breeze and towards the end of January, you'll see this huge cloud of sort of pollen coming off it, and that's one of the first trees out in the UK countryside to start getting people sneezing, because you know, some people are allergic to all sorts of different forms of pollen. So I mentioned the poison here. It's in the leaves, it's in the branches, it's in the sap of the tree, it's even in the roots, and so it's a really toxic tree. But the only part that's not toxic, even the seeds in the middle of these arils, these bright red down-facing cones, even the seeds inside. If I take an aril off and just squeeze it, oh, it's very slimy, let that branch fly back up without hitting you in the face, and there we are, there's the seed in the middle. It's so slippery and slimy, and even that seed is full of taxine, that poison I mentioned. But the aril can be eaten by birds, and that's exactly what it's meant to do.
This red, very sticky flesh.
It is sticky and very slimy.
It's all over the ground here as well.
It is. Now, that's the other interesting thing. Yew trees cast so much shade. The foliage, when we're looking up, it almost looks like night time. It's so dark. Blackbird has just hopped through on the other side of the tree, and it's after a breakfast of arils.
But not the seed.
No. And the shade out on the ground is so intense. Look, there's just nothing growing there under the periphery of the tree, and they can get up to 60, 70 feet tall. I suppose this is a good 50 feet, and it's one of the oldest living trees in the UK. They can get to 500, 600, 700 years old, but what happens quite often is the centre of the tree, because it's so old, it rots away and they become hollow. And so that's quite interesting, and so they're quite difficult to date. It's a really heavy wood as well, so if you cut out a cubic foot of yew wood and you put it in water, it sinks. It's actually heavier than water, which is hard to understand, because a lot of our native trees, you did it with a normal conifer like Scots pine, put a log in water, it's pretty buoyant, but yew is different. There we are, sinks to the bottom, very dense indeed.
I hope your boat here isn't made out of yew. You've got an old boat all covered up in tarp.
Boat. Yes, it's nothing to do with me. Somebody's said, I noticed you've got a long building at the end, I've got a boat to store, and may I sort of just use the sort of shaded bit under the yew tree to store it? And I said, oh, all right, temporarily. And it's been here 3 years, needs clearing up. It's seen better days. So
it's not exactly the QE2, is it?
No, it isn't. And the tilt covering it is covered in mosses. And that's one of our next topic. And speaking of hollow trees, I'm now going to take you to one as a special treat this morning. What more could a boy want?
But a brilliant yew.
Yes, absolutely
historic,
wonderful.
Beautiful, with these arils. Go to your local old churchyard, particularly an old church with an old-fashioned graveyard, and you're bound to see one of these.
Yes, there's, and now you know why.
Rat is very excited, Chris.
He is. He's just been allowed out of the truck. We've come out more or less into the middle of High Ash Farm, in the bottom of one of the valleys, and there's what was a wildflower field here, sown in early summer, and until this last week we've had actually cornflowers and a few corn marigolds still in flower on there. So it's really late, because we still haven't had really harsh frosts as yet, so there's some nice cover has been left here for birds to feed on. They'll eat the seeds, and Rat is very excited about this, because there's likely to be some small rodents out there. He doesn't seem to catch much, but he uses his nose a lot and gets very excited if he finds anything. Oh, he's jumped back in the truck now. No need to do that. Now, I brought something interesting with us, which is a screwdriver here, and I'm just going to change the end in the screwdriver.
It's one of these electric ones.
It is, yes. Yes, a very lazy way of undoing screws. And we turned round and we're facing a very large old oak tree.
I remember this tree from earlier in the year. There was lots of insects living inside, weren't there?
There was, and Britain's largest wasp species, the Hornet, and there's still the sign there saying 12 feet away and a hornet's nest, and the hollow in the oak tree. We spoke about yew trees a little while ago. As they get older, they get hollow, and the hollow can be quite big. And this is no exception, but it's in an oak tree, and it's really hollow, and it's large enough for 2 people to get in. Gudgin.
Hang on, there's 2 of us.
There's 2 of us, 1 screwdriver.
What are you saying here?
Right.
We haven't got to go in that tree.
We are, and Rat has just apprehended a walker who's laughing his head off at the barking. So I brought a coat to be kind to you, because we're going in, although it's dry inside, we can kneel down on that. But first of all, I've got to do something, which is to take that mesh off, which stopped any children going in there. I didn't think that was a very good idea to have children perhaps 18 inches away from what I hope was going to be a hornet's nest that we could visit in early winter where we are now. So let's just start the drill up and undo these 2 screws. One there and one there, like so. And we can take the mesh off, and hopefully we'll be able to visit a hornet's nest. No,
without hornets.
Without hornets, because this is the interesting thing. It's the end of their year completely, and they now desert the nest. But we've got a kind of an explorer in there already. I mentioned 2 people being able to get in there, but I didn't mention a dog as well, so it might be a bit tight. But he's now decided to come out. I can lay the screwdriver in, so I brought an extra coat with us. Right, so I've popped a coat in the bottom on the base of the sort of leaf litter in there. And what I'm going to do is to invite you to yet another strange place I've taken you to as we've done our series of podcasts. We've been in my attic way in the past. We've been in a boat.
Under a bridge?
And we've been under a bridge where you have banged your head on the RSJs, and it's still put no sense in there. But let's have a bit of fun, and it's 2 men in a hollow tree. I'll go in first.
How old is this oak, do you think?
She's about 350 years old, and it's completely hollow. It's like a cathedral inside. Here I go.
Goes Chris. Disappeared through this huge crack in the side of the tree. Now I've got to come in as well, and my word, I've never done this before. Huge opening here, and here we are. This is the oddest feeling, isn't it? We're inside this mighty oak,
and it's a living oak as well, and it's absolutely dead on the inside, and it's full of cracks and fissures, so it's a brilliant place for any hibernating insects like spiders. And so what happened is there's another hole there, and the hornets were using that as their entrance. They weren't using this big crack that you just crawled through in here, and they tried to fill that in just to make the entrance a little bit smaller. You can see there's some, and remember, they make paper. Hornets are not like bees. Bees have wax glands on the side of their body, and they can manufacture wax to make their combs. Hornets, although they're social insects as well, a bit like honeybees, they can do the same thing, but what they do is to chew up this dead wood, like on the inside of this tree, and mix it with saliva and make it into paper, a paper-like structure. So I brought the torch in because it's pitch black in here, and we'll turn it up.
Oh, look at that.
And above our head, it's absolutely massive. And what we're doing is we're looking at the outside of the nest with all the different species of paper, trees, if you like, each giving the paper a different colour. So it's absolutely beautiful. And all round the outside of the nest, and I'm looking up and it's 2'6" from bottom to top. So it's getting up towards 1 metre tall. And inside is the nest chambers, and you can actually see the cells. And so, poor Laura Cuffin, our photographer, she's going to have to come in here with her camera, and we hope, fingers crossed, she'll be able to get in.
So that is the hornet's nest.
Yes.
And it's large, isn't it?
It's
much bigger than a human head.
Oh, goodness, yes.
It's got these honeycombs right in the middle, beautiful, perfect hexagons.
Yes, but they're not honeycombs, it's purely for brood. Remember, bees will collect pollen and nectar. Hornets are carnivorous. They'll catch insects and eat them, chew them up. So there was no pollen and nectar to come in here. Completely different species. But the cells have the 6 sides, but they're much, much larger. That we're looking inside the nest itself at the moment, and that's where the brood is raised. And there'd have been over 1,000 hornets in here at its peak.
So you wouldn't want to have been sitting in here.
They'd have probably been all right. That's the strange thing. They're quite amiable. What you wouldn't want to do, they'd be buzzing all round you and maybe bumping into you. But what you wouldn't want to do is to just hit the nest with your fist, because not only one hornet, they sense danger collectively, and you would be attacked and stung, and you'd have a job to get out of here. And if you got stung on the face or the neck, although the stings might not kill you, then the shock probably would do. So
it could be a very fatal thing to do.
Yes. Now, the major part of the nest isn't that sort of nest columns up in the middle. It's this, which, because I did mention there's going to be 1,000 hornets in here, you've got to have ventilation. So when you look up at the nest, you'll see all these sort of vents all the way round the side of the nest. Nothing at all whatsoever to do with the brood chamber. And that's for ventilation. And the way they're shaped is the cool air goes in at the bottom and comes all the way out, way up there, and I can see the exit vents at the top, and that's to keep the nest cool, because when you've got all that brood rearing going on. So what happened here is in about early February, perhaps late February, one female queen hornet with the survivors of the previous year's nest, wherever that was, came and found this site and thought, this looks like a suitable site, and she laid a kind of little golf ball sized nest at the top with perhaps 5 or 6 brood cells in it, laid her eggs in that, and she was fertilised from the previous year. Her husband would have died nearly straight away. All the workers from the previous year's nest would have died before they got to winter, and there had been several queens reared from the nest, wherever it was. I don't know where last year's nest was in 2024, but she survived and chose this as her site. And it's a brilliant site, because that means sometimes if it's under a tree stump, you can't get to it. And this is pretty well perfect for us to come and visit in the dry. Everybody should see Matthew's face.
Inside a tree.
Inside.
But that nest is now spent. It won't be used again.
Absolutely, it won't be used again. You might have earwigs in there, ladybirds, but the whole hollow, we're looking up, and it does look exactly like the inside of a cathedral. We're looking up into the spire, and the nest is about 2 foot, 3 foot above our heads, although I'm on my hands and knees here, and it's beautiful. So we'll get our photographer, Laura Cuffin. So to save everybody who listens to the podcast coming into a hollow tree,
we do it so you don't have to.
Well, that's a really good, that's a lovely advert for the podcast. Yeah. Perfect words, Matthew, thank you. But just forget everything else. It is a structure of absolute exquisite beauty.
But supreme engineering as well.
Absolutely, it stayed there. So all the way round those vents, right out in the middle of the nest, are 5 or 6 nest chambers with a big pillar of paper holding in between them. So they're suspended rather like a stash of plates with the little spaces in between them and facing downwards, not like bees where the combs, the honeycombs and the brood combs face outwards at a slight tilt upwards and much smaller. These face vertically down, so the eggs are laid in there, and then there's food put in by the adult hornets that come in and feed the brood. Then it grows, they keep them fed. So there's a lot of heat produced in a nest that's active like this, and that's why you have to keep it cool with these vents. So clever. And so it's well, early ventilation is the only way you can describe it.
It's a really elegant design as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Very beautiful. So there we are. That's the first 2 men in a hollow tree. You can't make it up, but it's worth a little bit of discomfort to see something as beautiful as that. And just remember, most of the inhabitants of this nest, they've done it for love. They're not going to have any progeny themselves. Just the queen rules the nest, if you like. She produces all the eggs and the workers do all the feeding, and what they're after is to procreate themselves again into future years by producing the queens. They will have all left. All those workers are now dead. They're all deceased. So what a short life over the summer months may be, just a few weeks long for some of them, and they're all deceased, but they've done it for the sake of the colony, and that's how social bees and insects survive. Perfect.
Well, here we are in the heart of this oak. We've got to try and extricate ourselves.
Well,
now.
you have. I'm quite happy in here.
You can stay in. Oh, right. Got the reversing lights on. See if I can get out without bumping my head. Without falling onto the ground, which I think is going to happen.
Yeah,
Oh.
he's down. Well done, Matthew.
Oh, God. Do you want a hand? Here we go. Watch your head. Oh, my word.
Right.
He's out.
That's a first.
And last.
Last. Oh dear. Right, just beautiful. But look at the weight of that tree. There's, 12, 15 tons above our heads just then, and it's hollow. Unbelievable.
Thank you, Hornets.
Yes.
We're on the edge of Fox's Grove now, one of the sections of woodland on High Ash Farm. And it's a bit of a grey day really today. There is rain on the way, they say, but I think we'll miss the worst of it.
I think so, yes, you're completely right. It's gloomy, to say the least, but the clouds look pretty well laden with moisture, but we still can do with more rain. I know a lot of people are going to throw something at the radio or the mobile phone when I say that.
Your little stream here looks all right.
It's just started running, and it's really unusual. Even in 1976 it didn't dry up, and we had that famous dry summer, and this year it slowed up to the merest trickle, and it's now rejuvenated itself, and it's one of the feeder streams to the River Tass, and the water that's going past us now will probably be getting towards Great Yarmouth perhaps tomorrow morning, so there's about a 24-hour journey to get down the river system, where the rivers join the main river, which then becomes the River Yare. So we came here about a week ago because we had an unexploded bomb at the other end of the woodland.
In 1945.
Yes, in 1942 I think it was. One of the raids of German bombers heading the string of bombs that started at High Ash Farm, headed absolutely spot on to the Bolton and Paul and Lawrence and Scott electromotors factories in Norwich, which is the target of the German bombers, but they let the bombs go a little bit too early, unfortunately for High Ash Farm, but fortunately for the citizens and the buildings of Norwich. And during the last week I've done a bit of health and safety examination of these ash trees right on the southern edge of Fox's Grove, and so I felled those purposely, and now although we haven't had any violent winds, we're looking down the track, and about 50 yards in front of us is a very large ash tree that's gone right across the permissive walk, and I'd identified that as a safe tree only just over a week ago, and virtually no roots on it.
Look at that, it's sitting on its side,
Yes.
and where you'd normally expect a root ball and lots of tangles,
Yes.
it's nothing.
No, exactly that. There's barely a root. It's almost as though it's been cut off level with the ground. And that hugely alarms me for the future of our ash trees, because that one's still got a live top on it. And we're standing beside the second one, so two large trees have come down, 50, 60 metres apart, and also gone across one of the main public accesses at High Ash Farm. If we just walk down here a bit, the tree's got ivy on it, but it's not the ivy that's brought it down, it's actually deceased. And I looked at this tree, and again, I passed it as okay. You can see the one next to it, it's got a nice sort of fairly healthy top on it. And let's just look at the root ball on the same, is exactly identical. Look, it's
The roots have all been eaten away by the disease.
Yes, it's the ash dieback
So
disease.
the fear is these trees are just sitting in the ground with nothing to anchor them.
Absolutely, and that's petrifying. You know, there's just nothing there. We could walk up to it, but there's no need because there's no roots to see. It's just, and that tree weighs about 2.5 tons, I suppose.
And the age of the ivy on it as well. Look at
Yes,
the great thick.
Yeah, exactly that. So it's not the ivy that's caused the downfall of the tree, it's the fungus called Chilara, and so that's now a deceased tree, sadly. And that doesn't matter. You know, I don't mind fallen trees out in the woodland, but a lady with two dogs has just this instant walked past us, and you know, I might have to close this portion of the walk. So, you know, you have to have safety first is the motto. And when this is happening, because there's a good, just in this portion of the belt of the woodland, there's probably 150 other ash trees there. I can just hear the wind blowing through the trees now, just very gently.
I mean, you'd have to be very unlucky to be hit, but these things do happen.
It does happen, and especially with two in the space of a week. That's nothing to do with me felling these. I've done this bit. I tapped the tree right beside us here, and it was completely hollow.
You can see the hole in the middle here, can't you? Like a polo mint.
It certainly is, and that was a safety issue. And so I think it's kind of going way past my knowledge of what's a sound tree and what isn't, and basically any of these ashes can just keel over at any time, and I just begin to have a feeling of foreboding in my chest at the moment, because the last thing I'd want is to anybody to get injured. There's no small branches down as a pre-warning that this is going to happen, just the tree complete with its top has keeled over, and I have seen it about a year ago. I started to notice, just by being vigilant, that some of the trees are just sit down and have a coffee when I'm sawing in here, if there's any fallen trees going across the horse rides, and then I noticed a tree with a rotten root, and I'd go all the way around the tree, and it'd be quite a large tree, 24, 30 inches through the base, and there's just no roots on them. They're, affected almost, the tree's affected more in the base of the root system than it was in its top. So I've had to relearn the effects of ash dieback. Yes, it does affect the crown of the tree. The tree then reproduces some new shoots the following year, and that's very characteristic of the tree beginning to look kind of a bit stricken in its canopy. And it will then come back into leaf and almost looks normal in its second, third, fourth year. But what is happening simultaneously is the fungal spores are going right down the trunk, and it often stains the trunk in a particular way. Some of my logs here right beside the track will have this characteristic black staining in, and you can actually see where it's gone through the centre. That one's probably got about 150 rings on it, so 150 years old. It's just sitting here beside the track waiting to be cleared up and go to be axed up to be log split.
Reasonably, these trees could have lasted a lot longer, couldn't they?
They'd be, ash can live a long time, to 300 years. They're not as long-lived as the good old English oak, but nevertheless, they do have quite a long life, and as a British native tree, and as it's high ash farm, I have a particular fondness for them. But I have learnt a little bit more. So they say every cloud has a silver lining, and up in the canopy, way up above us, 50, 60 feet up, is the tops of the trees, and it's stunningly beautiful up there. So what I've done is I've just kept a couple of logs here, which are about 8-inch diameter, and I haven't cleared them up.
So these are up from the canopy? These.
Yes, and when I'm chainsawing, I start to see things like this, which is the mosses and the lichens growing up there, and this is their time of year. So whilst it's been dark and dry up in the canopy in the summer months because of all the foliage up there, then the leaves drop away and the light, particularly on the southern side of the tree trunks, starts to grow. And when you talk about modern world and fashion colours, these are way at the top there. There's some beautiful dark greens with cushion moss here, and seeing this in the sunlight,
This mustard colour.
Yes, there's mustard, all these different lichens and fungi. I won't mention the names of them because very few of them, although this is a particular one there called a cushion moss, these lichens here which spread themselves out, we've done some of the roof tiles at the farm before, the Norfolk pan tiles, and they have beautiful lichens on them, one called Xanthoria parentina. That's what I mean. The names are rather off-putting. They don't have common names. You nearly dislocate your jaw saying them. But forget all that. You don't need to know the names, and getting to know nature and just exploring its beauty, its colour even. It's like we visited the hornet's nest, the shape. It does something. It's very simple to just observe. You don't need to know all the details, but it just lifts the spirits. And with this really complex world we now live in, fast moving, it changes your perception. You realise that there are other things going on with our beautiful planet, and some of them are just to be celebrated, and this certainly has to be one of them. So again, I'll get our photographer so we can share some of these images. Poor Laura, she'll nearly have a full-time job here soon, and we'll see if we can capture these and put them on the farm website. But I find these lichens, the colour of them, I don't know what colour it's kind of a sage colour next to another lichen.
That's right, like sage leaves, these same colour, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful.
And these are like a living
Yeah, it is
organism.
living, but it's really unusual. Once you learn about lichens, it's a fungus and an algae growing together in harmony. So it's kind of symbiotic relationship. You just start to learn about it, but I don't want to do that. It is really complex, and particularly all the names the early botanists used for these sort of growths, which are described as very lowly, only because they're some of the original things that inhabited, the living things that inhabited our planet.
And this is why we call our trees like vertical pastures.
Yes, they
because
certainly are.
They are home to so many different things, and including these lichens and mosses.
Yes, and look, there's been a woodpecker. There's made a tiny little hole. There's obviously been some grub there, 2 or 3 holes just on that side. And again, I'll turn the trunk round to the south side here, where that gets all the sun on it. No mosses, no lichens growing on there at all. It's bare, same piece of wood, but a few tiny, looks like shotgun pellets have hit the side of the tree, and that's your common woodworm, the bane of anybody who has antique furniture, Anobium punctuatum. You see what I mean? The names kind of put you off completely.
Did you do Latin at school?
No, I didn't. No, I've had to learn this because of the years of broadcasting, podcasting, and it's sad that some of them beautiful things out in our world don't have the common names that we can closely relate to, that are easy to think and remember. And so that's a little bit sad, but it doesn't matter. You don't need to know all of that. What is important is appreciating the beauty of these simple things that grow here out in the countryside all over the UK, in fact all over the world. These are, you'll find these right up in the Arctic, these lichens and algae and mosses, and right down in the Antarctic as well, and everything in between. So they are amazing plants that can't call them flowering plants, they don't flower as such, but nevertheless they have a really important part in the foundation of all the living things on the planet. And it builds up from here right to the sort of peak. It's like a pyramid, and this forms the wide base of the food sources for many of the wildlife, birds, insects, mammals that all live out in the wild, our wildlife, which is what we celebrate on each week's Countryside podcast.
Chris, the sound of some of your favourite birds.
Matthew, it's one of the success stories for conservation at High Ash Farm. The house sparrows, one of those red list species, declined by 50% or more, and we have over 100 here. It's a huge smile on my face.
Chattering sparrows, just one of the sounds that you can hear on the High Ash Farm podcast. But we need a favour.
Yes, we do. We're asking for donations and any help that you can give to help keep the podcast going.
You can make a monthly or just a one-off payment. highashfarm.com/podcast.
Well done, Matthew.
Let's take a look at the post bag now, Chris, and lovely to get our first Christmas cards. I know you've got one. Here's one of a family of foxes, little cubs playing with the mum. And this comes from Jane and Carl, the Nicholsons, and Kai as well. Hello, Kai, and thank you for the cards. They're terrific.
Yes, much appreciated. We're getting so much correspondence each week now that it's really gratifying. And what I'll do is just let Rat out of the truck now.
Rat has managed to get himself into the truck and now he wants out.
Yes.
There he goes. Here's an email, and it's from Kevin Cox. Often on the podcast, you speak about numerous house sparrows that you've encouraged to the farm with nest boxes and feeding stations. I've heard you mention tree sparrows. They do frequent the farm, but in much lower numbers, I think you said. I, for one, would be very interested in learning more about the daily lives of tree sparrows. I've only ever seen them once on a farm in Somerset.
Yes, hugely declined. House sparrows, Passer domesticus, to give them their scientific name, have declined by over 50% in the last 25 years or so. They were so common when the BTO, that's the British Trust for Ornithology, started scientifically recording birds that they really weren't even bothered to be counted. So we have lost millions and millions of house sparrows, and even worse, they have a country cousin, which is the tree sparrow, which you see far less frequently, and they have declined by over 95%. So both those species, the commonest British birds, have become what we call red list species, a species sort of in huge decline and under huge worry as well, likely to become extinct if those kind of levels of decline continued over the next sort of century or so. Then they'd be more or less non-existent. So what are they? What do they look like? That's the tree sparrow. Well, it's a much smaller version than the house sparrow, more compact, and the call is very different. House sparrow's a little bit harsh. The tree sparrows are sort of a richer chirrup sound. So a smaller, slightly smaller, compact bird, chocolate brown on the top of the head, whereas a house sparrow, is sort of greyish brown on the top of the head, and the distinctive feature of the tree sparrow is it's got two what we call mutton chops. They look like long sideboards, but actually they're kind of black triangles on the side of the face, and so that helps you distinguish them, but they're far less common. Now, the thing with tree sparrows is males and females look almost identical, and a house sparrow, the male looks distinctly different to the female, so you never quite know whether you're looking at a male tree sparrow or a female tree sparrow. They're hole nesters, as are house sparrows actually, under your tiles in your roof, but the tree sparrow tends to be, like, I would call it the country cousin of the house sparrow, so often in hollow trees, sometimes away from, whereas you have house sparrows near people nearly always. In fact, Passer domesticus is the house sparrow's scientific name, and so they'll nest away from lots of contact and habitation, but as they're members of the African weaver bird family, the sort of untidiest nest builders in the world, they used to be really common here at High Ash Farm. About 10 house sparrows to each tree sparrow, to give you an idea. They've always, house sparrows have always been more common, but there would be trees with ivy on around a farmyard, and you'd see all this sort of hail straw hanging out of the side of the tree, and that would be the tree sparrow's nest. Very untidy, sort of loose congregation of nesting materials, but beautiful birds. I really love them. Now, what's happened here at the farm, we have so many house sparrows and so few tree sparrows. Occasionally, a male house sparrow will mate with a female tree sparrow, and we have hybrid ones here, and I've managed to photograph them. So sometimes the progeny are so like tree sparrows that you can't tell if it's a hybrid or not. So we have managed to photograph some of those, but nevertheless, they're declined hugely. There was a campaign, because they're widespread. Tree sparrows are hugely successful right across in the Far East, in China, and they had a campaign quite a while ago now to rid the country of the tree sparrow, because they're eating so much grain that they encouraged everybody all over the country to bang dustbin lids and blow horns and things, because if you could make sparrows, particularly tree sparrows, fly for a maximum of 2 hours, they got so exhausted they'd land on the ground, then you could kill them. We did similar things in this country. We had something called sparrow clubs right over the UK, where you could actually trap them and get a few pence each per head, because they're messy nesters, I mentioned, but they're even messier feeders, and we used to have giant flocks of house and tree sparrows at the farm, almost like a waterfall going the wrong way coming out of a crop, and my father would shoot them in the post-war years just because of the amount of grain just comes out of the ears. If they didn't like a particular grain they were eating, they'd drop it on the ground and move to the next one, particularly when the grain wasn't quite ripe. It was in what farmers know as the milky ripe phase and had lots of moisture in it. So that's why. So that's a brief history of them, and I could talk for the rest of the podcast, and a whole podcast, in fact, on tree sparrows and house sparrows. Well, I've done something which is amazing at the farm with the house sparrows particularly, is to halt and reverse the decline, and that means I don't control them at all, but I do everything that I know about that can help them. I do that, feed them, provide nest boxes, and the big reward for me is to see them come back in quite good numbers.
Here's an email from Chris Biggin, who lives in North Yorkshire. Chris, whilst taking my dog for an evening walk, I occasionally hear flocks of geese flying overhead. This can often be in the pitch black and sometimes on a foggy night. A pea super, says Chris. How do they manage to navigate in these conditions?
Yep, that's one of the mysteries of life. It can be any one a number of species of geese. In a way, it doesn't matter. They can be greylags, pinkfoot. There's several different species that fly. particularly at dawn and dusk, and they'll often use that period of time to feed. We get a lot of geese here in Norfolk, particularly on North Norfolk, and they fly along the coastal areas. They will land on pastures and graze on the grass. They'll land on one of their favourites is sugar beet tops as well, and where potatoes have been grown and the odd small potatoes left on the ground. So that accounts for the dawn and dusk movements, but they will take off and move to where they're going to roost for the night, and that can be along the salt marshes. So they will use a variety of mechanisms, and we don't know all of those, to actually navigate when it's windy. Particularly they'll listen to the sound of the sea and the shore, and they seem to be able to hear quite well when they're flying along, and they'll descend in numbers. So we have some geese at the farm, and they went cranky about a week ago, flying up and down the farmyard, so they were out there, sort of semi-wild geese that we have here, and a sort of V-shaped formation of geese flew over the farm. I think they were grey-lag geese, and my geese were calling them, and suddenly the formation turned round and landed on a field right next to the farm building. So we had 50 geese suddenly arrive, and that was quite amazing. So we don't know quite how they navigate in the dark, but they will certainly migrate in the hours of darkness.
It's Rat answering the questions here as well. Janet Raven says, we've found this bug on our bedroom window, and there's a photograph. It was on our windowsill a couple of weeks ago. So far been unable to identify it. Would it be a type of capsid beetle? Hoping Chris is able to help.
Yes, I was able to identify this, and thank you so much. It's an absolutely brilliant photograph of this strange looking insect. To start with, when I looked at it, I thought it's just going to be something called a shield bug, but then you have something quite exciting. I managed to identify it. It's called an assassin bug. It has got a long scientific name, but you can look it up, and it's really unusual. It's dark brown in colour. You'll often find them on heathland, and it's a hunter, hence its name. It has a little sharp dagger out of the middle, and it hunts insects and small spiders and other bugs about similar size to itself. It's not large, it's about 1/4 to 1/2 inch long. It can fly, and what it does, it injects the prey with a kind of venom that it has, and the venom dissolves the inside of its prey into a kind of liquid soup. This is sorry if it's a bit gruesome.
It's like a science fiction horror, isn't it?
Absolutely is. And then something amazing happens with its proboscis. It sucks the juices, these dissolved juices, back into itself and feeds itself like that. So it doesn't actually eat the bodily flesh, it dissolves it and then sucks it back in, and hence the assassin bug is what it's called. So it has got a long scientific name, and I won't try and pronounce it, but just a fascinating creature, just to show you the variety of things that we share our planet with. Absolutely amazing.
John Spink lives in Trinity County, California, and he's been enjoying all the talk about fungi in the last few weeks. Up here in northwest California, he says, we've had a good amount of rain, no frost, resulting in an explosion of fruiting bodies, the likes of which I've never seen, quantity and size. Here are a few examples. So these are fungi that we'd never see here, but have got their own names. And what do you make of these then?
Yes, so we've got the Pacific golden chanterelle, but we have common chanterelle here in the UK. He's got powdery brittlegill.
Oh, I love it.
Yes, look at that. As I said, some of the names that we explored in previous podcasts.
That's like an upside-down mushroom, the brittlegill.
Yes, it is. And you can see the gills underneath, which is how that particular species spreads itself through spores. Then we've got fairy ring golden chanterelles. Well, we have those here at the farm. They're fairly common. Field mushroom, obviously identical species to what we have here in the UK. And another one at the base of a stump, the honey mushroom, Armillaria malea, and we've discussed that on last week's podcast, I think.
It's a good season there because of the conditions?
Yes, and I mentioned these fungi, lichens and mosses grow internationally. We often think of them here specific to the UK, but they're far, far more widespread than that. And this is right across the water in America, and it's the same in Canada. This year's been a good year, but don't think of them as specific English or UK species. I just mentioned some of the other ones. They go a huge area across our planet, and really important as well in breaking down all the dead woods and things and returning it into the soil, and then something else comes along and feeds on them. You get that lovely cyclical sort of part of life where you live, die, and then you get recycled. So there we are.
Lovely to see the Californian fungi. Thank you very much, John, our own resident, far distant fun guy.
Yes.
Chris at highashfarm.com for any questions you may have, comments, anything about the podcast, anything you see that is slightly unusual and you'd like Chris to comment on, please do send them along. Chris at highashfarm.com. But we've sped to the end of another podcast.
Yes, and just looking forward to next week already. So's Rat the dog. He can't wait either. Do join us.
Is he lost patience here?
He's completely frustrated because we're standing here doing nothing, and there's mice to hunt and rabbits to sniff. Would you be quiet till next week? That's obedience, Rat.